Eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables, eat your fucking vegetables. What's cracking, guys? Omar Isov here, back with another video, back with Brad Schoenfeld. How you doing? Dr. Brad Schoenfeld.
Always good to see you, Omar.
Hey, great to see you. Also known as Jack Christopher Watkins. I'm not sure if I popularized that. Some people in the comment section, I think before we released the first video, I maybe said that, and other people watched the video and like, yeah, man, yeah. And you said, and you don't hear this in real life, like people
I've
don't.
never heard that before until you, but I'll take it. You know,
It's high praise because he's a phenomenal actor.
one of my favorite actors.
There, see the connection, dude. I was gonna say we spoke previously. We talked about hypertrophy. We talked about frequency when it comes to lifting. You publish a lot of research. For those that don't know, Brad has his PhD. He has published over 150 research papers. That's an insane amount. Most of them related to hypertrophy training. Yeah, and 12 books. You have a textbook too. Okay, this is a house of learned doctors.
You and your mom are hillbillies. This is a house of learned doctors.
We want to talk today because you said you have some interesting research as it relates to mind-muscle connection.
Correct.
Can you first kind of define that for those that might not be aware? You've heard bros, in the gym say, oh, like you got to get that mind-muscle connection. But what does that even mean first before we get into the research?
Basically, a mind-muscle connection is feeling a muscle as you're training. So if you're going to work the biceps, you want to focus on the muscle and actually feel it contracting as you are lifting the weight. And that's opposed to the way powerlifters generally lift, where they're just looking to move the weight as quickly as possible.
Right.
And we call it, the technical term for it in fitness is internal versus an external focus.
Okay.
So it's called the attentional focus is the broad term, and an internal focus is thinking about the muscle. External is just thinking about the outcome, is
Sure.
getting the weight up.
Yep. Okay. And so that's the mind-muscle connection. What has the research shown as it relates to hypertrophy before, let's say, recently?
Yeah, so interestingly, there's never been a longitudinal study that had looked at it. So there's been a lot of studies that have looked at EMG, electromyography, where you actually, it's kind of like an EKG of the muscles. You look at the electrical activity, and there's been a lot of good research showing that when you think about a muscle, when you visualize the muscle, you can get greater electrical activity in that muscle.
Okay.
So let's say I'm doing the chest and I'm focusing on the pecs as opposed to the triceps. You can deactivate the triceps to some extent while you are getting greater activation in the pecs. But never had been studied in terms of whether that makes muscles grow more. So
Okay.
it kind of is intuitive. You'd say, well, if you're going to get greater activity, it should translate to better muscle growth. You don't know that until you study it. And we have completed a study. It is currently in review. So scoop,
Very cool.
Another scoop.
Another scoop.
For the ESUF video cast.
Please tell me the mind-muscle connection is a thing.
And so let me give you the specifics. What we did, we actually looked at the biceps and the quads.
Okay.
And we had them do just training biceps and quads. This was in untrained subjects. And
Yeah.
usually my research is, as you know, well-trained subjects.
Yeah.
Here I specifically chose untrained subjects because I wanted to make sure they were a blank slate.
Okay.
I didn't want, like, if you would have me in a study, and first of all, you'd never get me just to do biceps and
Right.
and
Gotta train
leg
the whole thing.
extensions. So it would be hard enough as it is, and we wanted to just do a single joint because it's easier to focus on a
Right.
given muscle with that. That's number one. But number two, someone like myself, I do a mind muscle every time I train. And if you tell me if I was in a group that didn't,
Yeah.
I'd have a very difficult time not doing it. And you couldn't test.
Yeah.
Whether, you don't know what they're thinking. So I wanted
That
a
could
blank
muddy
slate.
the study a little bit.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we did untrained subjects, and by the way, that begets another study where we'll try at some point to use well-trained subjects. But to make a long story short, we had one group that we said focus on the muscle, and we had they were trained so that we had a research assistant with every subject for every set saying that, every rep they're saying
Like, feel
focus
it,
on
yeah.
the muscle, and the other one we're saying get the weight up.
Yeah.
Long story short, in the biceps, there was a clear advantage, roughly double the growth in the biceps.
The bros were right, dude.
But
Yeah.
there's a caveat.
Quads, no.
The quads were no difference.
Very
and,
interesting.
So here's what we think. So it's obviously impossible to know, but
Yeah.
we can speculate that there is actually good research showing that people are able to use their muscles in the upper body and think about them to a much greater extent than the lower body. Number one, that was somewhat borne out. We did an exit interview where after each person had finished the study, we said, well, how'd you feel about the study? Tell me what you thought. And several of them said, who were in the mind muscle group, said they had a tough time visualizing the quads.
Really?
That they found it much easier to visualize the biceps, which is logical, because when you're picking up things like your legs or gross motor muscles,
Right.
basically they're for ambulating, for moving and kicking things, but you don't
Karate
lift
chopper
things up. Yeah, well, or you don't lift things up in fine ways, and that obviously involves more focus on
Yeah.
the muscle. And we feel, and this is why we'll need to test it now in trained subjects, but that someone who is more in tune with their muscles, so people who lift, like
Yeah.
me, we now know how to feel the muscle to a greater extent, and we feel that you get greater benefits, hypertrophy in the quads. Interestingly, too, really no differences in strength between the two groups. So,
Really?
there was some weird things. We used an isometric dynamometry where we do isometric testing, and yeah, it was weird how one, I think it was the lower body, showed greater effects with external and the upper body with internal, and there was huge variations
Yeah.
in terms of how they responded. So really don't know what to make of that, but interesting findings.
I think your hypothesis when you talk about upper body versus lower body, I've heard often, and that makes sense too. We said fine motor patterns where we pick things up with our upper body, so maybe it's just more intuitive for us to feel that particular muscle. I think, like for myself, for instance, if you were to tell me like just do a bicep curl and like think about your bicep, it's easier than even a leg extension. Yeah, in a well-trained subject, you could begin to feel it more, but it's easier right out of the gate to feel it in maybe your biceps.
Right.
Now, what would the takeaway point be for someone that's watching this video that's thinking, man, I just want to get jacked. Like, I'm looking to train everything. I want to be Ronnie Coleman. Besides choosing different parents, what else should they do?
So the take home is that the bros were probably right about this one,
Yeah.
and that I would certainly, based upon the evidence that we have here, recommend a mind-muscle connection. And interestingly, when we talk about tempo, lifting tempo, I think a lot of that just is irrelevant. Like, you don't want to focus on 2 up, 1 down.
Yeah.
Focusing on a number, to me, is not what you should be doing.
Focus
You
on the
should be
muscle instead.
focusing on the muscle and let that take care of itself.
Yeah.
You don't need to have a specific time, a duration, but rather focus on the feel of the exercise and make sure you're working it under control. And assuming you do that, that should be the best way to maximize growth.
Wait, Brad, so you're telling me you shouldn't do like slow and controlled 1-minute reps? Like I don't know what to think anymore.
I would probably argue against that.
You would argue against that.
Yep.
I love anyone that has like real knowledge when it comes to lifting or just in general. There's no like hard and fast. It's like, yeah, I would argue against that. It's exciting to see research as it comes out that informs, maybe it disagrees with, what people say, like bros will say in the gym, and then everything kind of changes over time. That's basically what happened with flexible dieting.
Yeah.
Before everyone was kind of eating tilapia, brown rice, and broccoli, and then there was a paradigm shift where the research came out, or just a lot of people that were knowledgeable. It's cool to see the same thing when it comes to training. So in this case, which a lot of people out there watching, people that are more inclined towards that hypertrophy, will be like, all right, man, bros were right. That's a good thing.
And by the way, I'd end by saying that the best research comes from the field. So one of my hobby horses, one of the things that I do in my lab is to try to test what we know through bodybuilding. I've worked with many, many very high-level bodybuilders. I was a bodybuilder myself, so really much of what I'm testing is stuff that has been promoted in the gyms. That's the bro science, but bro science is often right. Hey, look, the biggest bodybuilders in the world generally are getting jacked because they know what they're doing.
They probably know what they're doing. Yeah,
not always,
yeah.
but the tilapia, probably not happening, but a lot of this stuff, and it's important to test these in a controlled environment to know, because just because someone is huge doesn't mean they couldn't be even huger if they're doing certain.
It doesn't mean they're optimizing, and I think that's
Right.
why probably for several reasons why you're so popular with the like muscle building crowd is because you kind of give a voice not to the bros of lifting, but as you said, you have a lot of practical experience, like as a trainer from before, research now, then you could test out a hypothesis, and also just as a fan, as someone that loves to lift, so you kind of combine all that together and you get the best possible result.
Yep.
I'll put it this way, Brad, thank you so much for being on. Where can people find you?
I have a website, lookgreatnaked.com,
Yep.
and I'm all over social media. Just do a search and you will find me.
And I will put also in the description for those that are interested in hypertrophy, the Max Muscle Plan, as well as your more in-depth textbook. What's it called?
Science and Development of Muscle Hypertrophy.
Yeah, that's no joke. For those that are
The
interested,
real deal.
check that out. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like the damn video, and I'll see all you guys, my rascals, in that next one. Peace.
Eat your vegetables, eat your vegetables, eat your fucking vegetables.